Hey friends, it's Laurie. Thanks so much for stopping by. Today, I'm sharing some of my favorite spring and Easter DIYs. As always, I used Dollar Tree supplies, some recycled items, and things I had on hand. I really hope you enjoy them, so let's get busy. Getting started, I'm using 2 of the 4x6 wooden pallets from the Dollar Tree. To attach them together and to give them a bit of a base, I'm using 6 of the Dollar Tree tumbling tower blocks. Attaching them all together, I'm using my Starbond thick glue. It sets up super fast, and I have the company linked below, along with a coupon code in case you'd like to check it out. I turned my 2 pallets over and I added some of my Starbond thick glue to the end support, and then I'm just attaching 2 of my tumbling tower blocks. I then added some glue to the ends of my pallets and attached them together. From there, I glued 2 of the tumbling blocks over the ends of the pallets to help hold them in place. I then glued 2 more tumbling blocks over the end support. This glue sets up so quickly that it was ready to paint in about 2 minutes. I used my white acrylic paint and I gave both sides a complete coat. Now that it's dry, I'm adding on a hanger and I cut a piece of jute about 18 inches long. Then, using my glue gun, I attached it to the back of my sign. This DIY can also be used without the hanger, and it makes a really cute stand-up sign. With that complete, I'm going to place it aside and paint my lettering. I'm using one of the metal welcome signs from the Dollar Tree, and using my blue acrylic paint, I'm giving the front a complete coat. When it's dry, and to help protect the finish because sometimes the paint can scrape off of the metal, I'm then going to give it a coat of Mod Podge. To spell out the word spring on my welcome spring sign, I'm using some of the wooden Dollar Tree letters. I chose 6 different pastel colors and then painted each letter in a different one. When I was done, I then set my letters aside to dry. I had 2 small wooden birdhouses in my stash, so I'm using these on my welcome spring sign, but the Dollar Tree also sells larger birdhouses and you can just add 1 of those. I removed both of their hangers and then using my golden brown acrylic paint, I gave them both a coat. Each birdhouse has an accent star, so I'm using the same blue paint that I used on the word welcome, and I'm giving each a coat. From there, I used my light green acrylic paint and I painted each roof. Once the birdhouses were dry, I then took an old piece of sandpaper and I just ran it along the edges to give them a bit more of a rustic look. With all my pieces painted and dry, it's now time to put my sign together. I'm using my E6000, adding some to the back of each birdhouse and then centering 1 on each end of the sign. I'm now adding some E6000 to the back of my word welcome, and I'm centering it on the top between my 2 birdhouses. And now once again, I'm using my E6000, placing some on the back of each letter and centering the word spring under the word welcome. I want to add some birds to my sign, and I found this 4-pack at Michael's. I'm going to use my glue gun and attach a blue and a green one onto the birdhouses. To finish up, I'm using some of the Dollar Tree blue gingham ribbon. I'm just making a simple bow, and then using my glue gun, I'm attaching it to my jute hanger. And now that I'm done, my welcome spring sign is ready to hang. starting my Farmhouse spring bunny by using one of the wooden cutouts that I picked up at the Dollar Tree. I removed the jute hang tag, and using my gray acrylic paint, I'm painting everything but the accent on the ears and the tail. When I was done, I then used my white acrylic paint and accented the inside of the ears and the tail. I'm adding a hat onto my bunny, and this is just a small straw hat that I had in my stash. You can pick them up at Michael's or Walmart. Using my scissors, I cut about a third of the back off of the hat. I made sure to leave enough of the back of the hat so that I could hot glue it onto the bunny. I'm using some of this buffalo check ribbon that I picked up at the Dollar Tree. I'm measuring it across the brim and then cutting it to size. When I'm done, I'm using my hot glue gun to attach it into place and then folding down the two ends. I'm adding an accent to my hat. I'm using this leaf along with a small silk daisy. I'm placing them together and then hot gluing them in place. Adding it to my bunny, I first decided where I wanted the hat to be. I added some hot glue to the back and then just attached it in place. I'm using a pencil and I'm going to accent around the outside edges and the ears on the bunny. This step is completely optional. I just like the way it looks. And so all I'm doing is rubbing the edge of the pencil around the edge of the bunny and just kind of working it in with my fingers. Along with the bunny, I'm also accenting the ears. I'm using 3 sprigs of this pretty lavender. It came from the Dollar Tree and I removed it from the main stem. I clipped them away from where they were attached. I laid them on the bunny and then added some hot glue. I'm making a simple bow for the bunny, and you can use the same buffalo check ribbon that we used on the hat. I'm going to use this 1.5 inch buffalo check ribbon that I had on hand. It's a wired ribbon and I just turned it into a simple bow. You can always dovetail the ends. I just cut mine off at an angle. When I was done, I added some hot glue to the top of the stems and then just popped my bow in place. To match the accent on the bunny's hat, I'm using these 3 silk daisies that I had on hand. I added some hot glue to the center of the bow, attached 1 daisy, and then attached the other 2 to the other sides. To add the cottontail to my bunny, I'm adding this white pom, and believe it or not, it came from the inside of a Dollar Tree pom-pom that I used for a gnome's beard, but if you don't have something like this on hand, you can always use a large cotton ball. I added some glue and pressed it into place. To finish up, I added a piece of this thin satin ribbon as the new hanger. And now that I'm done, this bunny is ready for spring. If you're new to my channel, please consider clicking on that little red subscribe button below, leaving me a thumbs up, and to all my returning friends, you know I'm always so happy to see you. I'm starting my project by using one of the Dollar Tree wooden carrots. I'm removing the jute hanger and I'm actually going to be working on the back. I'm making my carrot look like a classic orange carrot, so I'm giving it a coat of orange acrylic paint. Once that has dried, I'm now painting the top with this pretty light foliage green acrylic paint. I'm adding some shadowing onto the carrot and I'm just using a regular pencil. I'm running the side of the pencil along the side of the carrot and then I'm just rubbing it in with my finger. I keep working my way around until the carrot has a nice smoky edge. To mimic how carrots have those little lines on them, I'm just using my pencil and making some random lines, and then once again, I'm just rubbing them in. I'm replacing the jute hanger. I cut a piece at about 14 inches. I'm using the original holes and just making a couple of knots in the back. For the top accent on my carrot, I'm using this pretty light green Dollar Tree mesh, but you can use any color green that you'd like. I cut 6 pieces, each at 14 inches in length. To attach them together, I'm using 3 pieces of floral wire. They're 12 inches long, and I'm going to cut them in half. I'm taking 1 piece of mesh and I'm matching up the 2 ends. Once they're together, I'm pushing the 2 sides to the center and making a little bunch. I'm then weaving my wire through it, leaving about 1 inch on the bottom. And when I'm done, I'm folding both ends over and twisting them together tightly. I'm then folding those same 2 ends in the opposite direction, twisting them together tightly, and then cutting off the excess wire. I'm then following the same instructions for the other 5. Attaching them to the carrot is super easy. I just added some hot glue where the top of the carrot met the bottom and then attached them in place. While I was attaching them, I placed 4 in the back and 2 in the front to give it a bit of a layered appearance. I want to hide where I attached the mesh to the carrot, so I'm cutting a piece of the Dollar Tree burlap ribbon long enough to wrap around the top. I then just folded it in half and hot glued it into place. I'm making a bow for my carrot, and I'm using 3 ribbons from the Dollar Tree, the burlap ribbon with the lace accent, the plain burlap ribbon, and the burlap ribbon with the orange polka dots. I'm using my bow maker and I'm starting with my lace and burlap ribbon. I'm making 5.5 inch tails and 2 4-inch loops. I'm then using my burlap ribbon, and once again, I'm making 2 5.5 inch tails and 2 4-inch loops. I'm finishing up with my orange polka dot, and once again, I'm giving myself 5.5 inch tails, but this time I'm making 2 3-inch loops. And now that I'm done, I'm attaching my bow together using a piece of floral wire. I fluffed out my loops, and now I'm going to dovetail the ends, which is super easy. You just fold the ribbon in half and cut away at an angle. I'm using my hot glue gun to attach the bow to the carrot. Once I have it in place, I'm going to use one of these felt carrot stickers that I found at the Dollar Tree as an accent in the center of my bow. And with that, my wooden carrot is ready to hang. Getting started, I'm using one of the larger hanging chalkboards from the Dollar Tree. I'm turning mine sideways and I'm removing the jute hanger. You can always paint the outside wooden frame, but I found this really pretty Bumblebee ribbon at the Dollar Tree, so I'm going to be using this. I'm first going to start by measuring the ribbon across the top of the frame and making sure I have enough length in the back to attach it. After I cut my first piece, I'm just going to match it up on the ribbon and cut a second. And now I'm measuring a length of ribbon across one end, making sure once again that I have enough length on each end to attach it in the back, and then I'm cutting a second piece. Now that I have them all cut, I'm starting with my shortest pieces. Using my glue gun, I'm adding a dot of hot glue on each end. And now I'm centering and attaching my shortest ribbon on the side. And when I'm done, I'm doing the exact same thing on the other side. And now I'm adding a dot of hot glue on each of the corners and attaching the ribbon ends. I'm now following the exact same instructions, and I'm adding the top and the bottom ribbon. Once they're in place, I'm turning the sign over and I'm attaching the ribbon ends on the back. The Dollar Tree has a bunch of different lettering stickers you can use for this project in case you don't have a Cricut. I'm using the Dollar Tree's yellow vinyl paper, and I'm spelling out the words "Be Inspired" on my Cricut. I'm adding a bee accent to the right, so I'm tucking my lettering close to the left edge. Once I had it attached, I then just pressed the letters into place. I'm adding some accents onto the upper left corner, and I'm using this Dollar Tree buffalo check ribbon and making a simple bow. When I was done, I then cut both ends at an angle. When I was done, I then used my glue gun and attached it in the upper left-hand corner. This next step is completely optional. I'm adding on 2 pieces of greenery and a daisy. I had them on hand, but you can find them at the Dollar Tree. I added some hot glue to the center of my bow and then just attached the 2 green stems. I used my scissors to cut off the back end of the daisy to make it flat. I then added a dot of hot glue onto the ribbon and attached it. For my bee accent, I'm adding on this really cute bumblebee. It's a flower pot hugger, and I found it in the garden department at the Dollar Tree. To attach it, I'm simply hanging it over the top of my sign, then turning it over and adding some hot glue to hold it in place. I then turned it over and added some hot glue to the bottom of the ladder. I bought a package of these tiny bumblebees from Amazon, and honestly, I didn't know what I could do with them because they are really small, but I'm going to add them onto my sign as an accent. I'm using 4 of them, and I'm placing 3 random dots of hot glue on my sign and attaching a bumblebee. And then I'm placing a dot in the center of the daisy, and I'm attaching one there as well. Now this next step is completely optional. My Dollar Tree got in a whole stack of the wooden cutting boards, so I'm going to use that as a backing for my sign. To attach the 2 together, I'm using my E6000, and I'm just adding a bead around the back of my sign. When I'm done, I'm also adding on a line of hot glue, and this will help hold the sign in place until the E6000 sets up. And now that I'm done, I'm centering my bee-inspired sign onto the wood. You can always use this sign as a stand-up on its own or even the center of a wreath, but I'm going to make mine hang, so I'm using a piece of this Dollar Tree nautical rope. I cut about 18 inches in length, and I'm attaching it to the back of the sign using my hot glue gun. To help strengthen the hanger, I'm using some of this Dollar Tree burlap ribbon, and I'm cutting 2 pieces about 2 to 3 inches in length. I then added some hot glue over both ends of the rope and then covered them with the ribbon. To finish up, I'm once again using the same buffalo check ribbon. I'm making a simple bow, this time with the tails being a bit longer. And then using my glue gun, I'm attaching it to the top of my hanger. And now that I'm done, my bee-inspired sign is ready to hang. I'm starting my project by using one of the wooden crates from the Dollar Tree, and this one measures just about 3 by 5 inches. To make the cart's handles, I'm using a Dollar Tree craft stick. I found my center point and cut it in half. I'm attaching the handles to the crate by using my Starbond thick glue. It sets up in just about 2 to 3 minutes, and I absolutely love this glue. If you'd like to check it out, I have the company linked below in my description along with a coupon code. I'm using my glue and I'm attaching the 2 craft sticks, each one on the end of the crate. With the handles in place, I'm using some of this golden brown acrylic paint and I'm giving it a complete coat. This is the color that I chose, but I think this cart would work in just about any color. Now that my cart's completely dry, I want to give it a bit more of a rustic look, so I'm just using an old piece of sandpaper and I'm kind of roughing up the edges. If you prefer to have your cart with a fresh coat of paint, just completely skip this step. To make the wheels for my cart, I'm using 2 caps from this Pure Leaf tea, but you can use milk caps or orange juice caps, and you can always paint them black. To attach them both together, I use some E6000. To make the wheel look a bit more authentic, I found 2 white matching buttons in my button jar. I then used my glue gun and attached one on each side of the wheel. I'm attaching the wheel to the underside of the crate. I'm using my glue gun and some E6000, and I'm placing the wheel in the center and having it hang just a bit over the front. The hot glue will hold it in place while the E6000 sets it up permanently. For the bunny pushing the cart, I'm using one of these white Dollar Tree bunnies, but if you can't find one, you can always use a plush that stands up and has arms. To dress my bunny, I'm using this little dress that I already had on hand, and I don't want to permanently dress the bunny, just in case I want to put it in something different down the road. You can always find some clothes at the Dollar Tree or at a thrift shop if you don't have anything on hand. I wrap the dress around and just kind of custom fit it to the bunny's body. Once I'm done, I'm going to hold it in place by using some of this pretty green and white gingham ribbon from the Dollar Tree. I cut a piece long enough to wrap around the bunny's waist, and then I tied a bow in the back. I want to give my bunny a hat, so I'm using the leftover piece from this small straw hat that I used in a past video. I'll have that linked below in case you'd like to check this bunny out. I actually cut off about 1/3 of the hat, and that's what I'm attaching to this bunny. I used the same Dollar Tree green gingham ribbon and I hot glued it into place. When I was done, I then held the 2 bunny ears together, added on some hot glue, and attached my hat. I found these felt carrot stickers at the Dollar Tree and I added one onto the hat as an accent. With everything complete, I'm now going to add the bunny and the cart together. I'm using some double stick tape to attach the bunny's hands to the handles. I just placed the pieces on her hands and then attached the cart handles. I'm filling my cart with some Dollar Tree carrots and some Dollar Tree eggs. You can always use some of these pretty sparkly Easter eggs. I'm going to be using some of these other eggs. They were actually a garland of eggs from the Dollar Tree and I just pulled them off. And to finish up, these Dollar Tree bunnies don't come with a little cotton tail, so I'm just using a regular everyday cotton ball and I'm attaching it to the back. And now that I'm done, this sweet little bunny with her cart full of Easter eggs and carrots is complete. Getting started, I'm going to be using an average size tin can. Mine has a design in the center, so I'm going to give it a band of white using my white acrylic paint. When it was completely dry and to help protect the finish, I did give it a coat of Mod Podge. Once it's dry, I'm going to attach it to this wooden sign that I picked up at Michael's on clearance for $1. You can always make your own by turning over a Dollar Tree sign, painting it white, adding on some pencil lines, and drilling out 2 small holes. I don't like this small hanger, so I'm removing it and cutting an 18-inch length of jute and then hot gluing it to the back. And as a little extra safety, I'm going to add a line of E6000 on top of the hot glue. When I was done, I then cut 2 short pieces of the Dollar Tree burlap ribbon. I used some E6000 to attach both of them over the ends of the jute hanger, and this way I know my hanger will never move. To attach my can to the wooden sign, I'm using a piece of floral wire. I'm adding a dot of hot glue to the front and then placing the wire in the glue. When my wire was attached, I then gave it a quick coat of white paint to hide the green. I decided where I wanted it placed on my board, and then I just slipped the wires through the openings in the wood. When I turned it over, my wires weren't long enough, so I used a half piece of floral wire and attached them both together. Then, to help hold the can in place, I used some E6000 and I placed it under both sides. To accent the front of the can, I'm using some burlap ribbon from the Dollar Tree and some buffalo check ribbon from Michael's. I measured a piece of the burlap ribbon long enough to wrap around the can and then I cut it to size. I then added some hot glue on the top and the sides to attach it. The buffalo check ribbon is a bit thinner than the burlap, so I cut a strip of that and I attached it the same way. As an accent, I'm using the same buffalo check ribbon and I'm just making a simple bow. To give the middle of my ribbon a more finished look, I'm just using a small piece of the matching buffalo check ribbon. I'm wrapping it around the center and then I'm hot gluing it in the back. And now I'm just adding some hot glue to the center of my project and attaching the bow. To finish up, I added in some yellow and white flowers from the Dollar Tree, and with that, my farmhouse spring planter is ready to hang. I'm starting my candle holder by using one of the metal welcome signs with a butterfly from the Dollar Tree. and then it was pretty easy. I just detached the butterfly from the sign. For the candle holder, I'm recycling a glass jar. It originally held some pizza sauce, and I made sure that the height of the jar was close to the size of the butterfly. To attach both my pieces together, I'm using some E6000, and I'm placing it on the back of the butterfly. I'm then adding on some hot glue to help hold it in place until the E6000 sets up. Now that I'm done, I'm pressing the butterfly against the front of my jar. I'm wrapping the top of the jar with this pretty blue Dollar Tree ribbon. I cut it to size, and then using my glue gun, I just attached it in place. To wrap the wings around the holder, I press down on the outside edges. For some reason, I'm just loving daisies this year, so I'm adding these 4 small daisies that I had in my stash on as an accent. I'm adding one on each side of the butterfly's wings to hide the hanger holes. I'm then attaching my last 2 daisies on each antenna. To give my candle holder some weight, I'm using some of the white Dollar Tree sand, and I'm adding in about 1/4 of a cup. To finish up, I always prefer to use an LED candle, so I'm using this one from the Dollar Tree, and all I did was turn it on and place it into my candle holder. I think this came out so pretty, and I can't wait to make more. I'm going to place them around my deck so I can enjoy them throughout the summer. Getting started, I'm using one of the wooden birdhouses from the Dollar Tree, and this one has 2 openings on the front. The roof is flat, and I want to give it a little texture and an accent, so I'm using some of the Dollar Tree's wooden craft sticks. I placed one on the roof and left just a bit of an overhang. Then, using my pencil, I marked the stick on the peak of the roof. Using that as my guide, I measured and cut 13 more, so I had a total of 14 sticks. To attach them to the roof, I used my Starbond thick glue, and I just love this glue because it sets up super quick. And I use it for all my natural wood projects. If you'd like to give it a try, I do have the company linked below in my description. After adding my glue to the roof, I attached the cut pieces, making sure to line up the ends with the top of the birdhouse roof. And as I was adding them, I made sure to snug them up close together. When I was done, I then followed the same instructions and added the 7 cut craft sticks to the other side. This step is completely optional, and you can always just leave the roof as is. With that complete, I'm also using 2 of the Dollar Tree wooden birdhouses with 1 entrance. I'm painting each a different color, and I'm using my yellow, green, and gray acrylic paint. I'm painting each of mine a different color, but you can always paint yours the same color or even make them all white. Now that all 3 are painted and they've dried, I'm giving each a coat of white acrylic paint on the roof and the base. Now that I have all my birdhouses painted and they're completely dry, I'm going to use my pencil to add on an accent. I'm using the edge of my pencil and I'm rubbing it against all sides of the roof. Once I'm done, I'm then using my finger and I'm kind of rubbing it in and smudging the pencil marks. I added some pencil marks onto the base and the sides of the birdhouse, and I rubbed those in as well. I did this for both the green and the gray birdhouses. For my yellow birdhouse, I followed the same instructions, but for the roof, I followed each individual line that I had added on, and then once again, I just smudged it all in. Now that I'm done and all my birdhouses have a gray smoky accent, I'm placing them aside to make the bases. I'll be using 3 candlestick holders and I'm making one by adding 3 wooden pieces together, and I had these all on hand. I'm attaching a chunky circle, a spool, and a candle cup holder. I'm attaching them all together using my Starbond thick glue. It sets up super quick and I love using it for all my unpainted wood projects. In addition to the candlestick holder I just made, I picked these 2 up. They're wooden at the Goodwill and I paid $2 for the set. To make them all match, I'm using my white acrylic paint and I'm giving each of them a coat. Now that they're dry, I'm using a piece of sandpaper and I'm sanding off some random places here and there on all 3 of my holders. Instead of using sandpaper, you can always use some black paint and leave some brush strokes here and there. After I sanded off the areas on my smaller holder, to darken the patches like the other 2, I ran the side of my pencil over them and then just kind of smudged them with my finger. With all the pieces complete, I'm attaching them together with my E6000. I added some to the top of each candle holder. I placed on the birdhouse and made sure it was centered. Now that the glue has set up, I'm adding one of these little birds, and I found these at Michael's to the side of my yellow birdhouse. I added a dot of hot glue and then attached the bird in place. I'm using this buffalo check ribbon that I picked up at Michael's to give all 3 birdhouses a bow accent, and sometimes you can find it at the Dollar Tree. I cut a length of ribbon and then tied a simple bow around each one and then trimmed off the tails. These birdhouses are so cute and inexpensive to make, and I love the little pop of color they bring to my kitchen. Getting started, I'm using 2 of the Dollar Tree arrow signs. The ribbon hangers are attached on the back, and I gently removed them from each sign. Because some of the staples left deeper holes, I'm using a piece of sandpaper and I'm just going to continue to file that area down until the holes disappear. Some of the holes were a bit deeper on some and not the others, but I did end up giving all 5 of them a quick sanding. When When I was done, because I want them to be attached at different heights, and to get my spacing, I pushed the center a bit higher and then the two ends a bit lower. I then used my ruler to make sure the two top points were even. Then using my pencil, I marked the cut lines on my pickets. Then to keep them organized, I marked 1 through 5 on their bottoms. With my pieces cut to size, I'm going to be attaching them together with 2 of the Dollar Tree wooden rulers, but you can use any type of wooden slats that you have on hand. The rulers have stickers on them and they're easy to remove. I just peeled them off. I turned my pickets over and then placed the flat side of both of my rulers down. I then moved the pickets, giving just a bit of space between each. I made sure my rulers were straight, and then using my E6000, I attached the pickets together. When it was dry, I then used my white acrylic paint and gave it a coat. I didn't paint the back because my planter is going to be against the wall, but depending upon where you're placing yours, you might want to paint that as well. I'm using one of my dark brown colored pencils, and I want to give all the pickets a little bit of an accent. I ran my pencil along the sides and the tops of the pickets, and then using my finger, I just kind of rubbed it in. I continued working my way around until the accent on my fence was complete. To make the planters for my project, I'm using 2 of these wooden boxes from the Dollar Tree. I'm removing the labels from the bottom, and then using the same white acrylic paint, I'm giving them a coat. Because I'm adding some flowers and carrots into my planters, I'm only painting about halfway down inside of the boxes. I'm also not painting the backs, and I'm only painting one side because I'm going to be attaching them together. With my boxes dry, I'm going to add a stripe of khaki acrylic paint, and this step is completely optional. Once the stripes have dried, I'm then going to use the same E6000, and I'm attaching the 2 ends that were unpainted together. While that's setting up, I'm going to be spelling out the word garden with these wooden letters that I picked up at the Dollar Tree. They also sell them at Walmart. You can use your Cricut or even stencil the word on. I'm going to paint mine with this really pretty sage green acrylic paint, but you can always use whatever colors fit your home decor. Before I add the letters to my boxes, I'm going to take that same brown colored pencil and I'm going to accent the top, the bottom, and the 2 sides. I'm then going to accent each of the letters, and once again, I'm just running my pencil around the edges and kind of just working it in with my fingers. I chose to add on these pencil accents to give my planter a bit more of a rustic look. With all my pieces accented, I'm then using my E6000 and I'm attaching the word garden onto the center of the boxes. Now attaching my planter box to the back of the fence is super easy. I just added some E6000 to the back and attached the 2 pieces together. I'm using 2 Sahara blocks. I had these on hand, but they do sell these at the Dollar Tree, and I'm going to cut them to size so they fit in each of the boxes. I placed one on the box to get my measurements and then cut them to size with my knife. To fill in my boxes, I'm using 2 lavender picks and 3 tea rose picks that I picked up at the Dollar Tree. I cut them to size, placed in my 2 sprigs of lavender, and then followed up with the tea roses. Once I had them in place, I then just kind of fluffed them out a bit. As an accent, I'm adding in this 6-pack of Dollar Tree carrots. I used my knife to make some holes in the Sahara, and then I just tucked my carrots into place. I had enough space to add 2 extra carrots, so I ended up adding a total of 8. To hide the Sahara, I'm using some of this reindeer moss that I picked up at the Dollar Tree, and I'm just tucking it around the stems and my carrots. To finish up, I had this butterfly in my stash, and it had originally come from the Dollar Tree. I just added it to the top without any glue at all, and it sat perfectly in place. And with that, my garden planter is ready to display. To start my recycled wood daisy sign, I'm actually using this piece of wood that I picked up out of the trash. My daughter and I went for a walk, and it was sitting on the top, and when I looked at it, she thought I was crazy, but I said, I think I see a sign. So I popped it in my tote bag, and here we are. I'm going to make a sign out of it. It's definitely seen better days, so I'm using a piece of sandpaper and kind of cleaning off any of that loose residue. Now that it's cleaned up, I'm using 3 flowers off of the stem from this Dollar Tree bunch. After I pulled them off, I then removed the centers. For the stems on my sign, I needed something really thin, so I just went outside and cut 3 off of a small tree. Mine were brown and I wanted them to be green, so I just used some of my green acrylic paint and I gave them each a coat. Now that they're dry, I'm going to attach both the stems and the flowers to the sign. But before I do, I'm going to dig through my button jar and find 3 buttons that I can use as centers for the flowers. I also want to add the word grow to my sign, so I'm going to spell it out using these Dollar Tree 3D stickers. I want them all to be yellow, so I'm giving them a coat with my yellow spray paint. Now that they're dry, I'm first going to start by placing my flowers onto the sign. I'm then using my glue gun and attaching the top one into place. And now I'm adding one of the yellow buttons to the center. Now I'm adding my first stem, placing it under the top petal. With that in place, I'm now attaching my 2 flowers and adding the button centers. With those in place, I'm adding my last 2 stems, and then using my glue gun, I'm attaching the ends under each of the petals. With my stems attached in place, I'm now adding the word grow, and I'm placing down the letters to find my spacing. Then, just using my glue gun, I'm attaching them to the sign. I'm adding on a bow accent, and I'm using some of this Farmhouse ribbon from the Dollar Tree. Once I decided how big I wanted it to be, I just made a simple bow. To add my bow, I added some hot glue over the stems and attached it into place. To finish up, I'm using the same Farmhouse ribbon, cutting a piece long enough for a hanger, and then attaching it with my glue gun. Now that I'm done, this recycled Sweet Daisy grow sign is ready to hang. To start my spring farmhouse bunny, I'm using one of the plush rabbits from the Dollar Tree, along with a package of Dollar Tree carrots. My bunny will be holding 3, so I'm using my hot glue gun and placing a dot of glue on one of the bunny's hands and then attaching the second to it. Before I add the carrots, I'm using a piece of lace that I had in my stash, and I'm going to wrap it around the bunny's neck and secure it in the back with my glue gun. With that in place, I opened my button jar and pulled out 3 black buttons. One was a little smaller than the other 2, and I just added a dot of hot glue onto the center of the lace and attached the button. To add the carrots, I simply slipped all 3 into the bunny's arms. With my carrots in place, I then took my 2 black buttons and I attached them to the front. I'm using some of the Dollar Tree buffalo check ribbon, and I'm just making a simple bow. When I was done, I then cut off both ribbon tails, and using my glue gun, I attached it in the center of the bunny's ears. To finish up, I did notice that the bunny was missing a tail, so I just grabbed a cotton ball and with my glue gun, I attached it to her bottom. And with that, this bunny is ready to hop into spring. To start my honey bear in a beehive DIY, I'm using one of these metal containers that I picked up in the stationery department at the Dollar Tree. I need to raise the bottom just a bit so that my bear will sit in there nicely, and I'm using 4 of the tumbling tower blocks from the Dollar Tree. I added some hot glue to the bottom and placed in 2 of my blocks, and then added some more hot glue and stacked the next 2. I'm going to be covering this with the Dollar Tree nautical rope, and because the container is silver and I'm not 100% sure that the rope will cover it completely, I'm going to give it a coat inside and out with some of my brown acrylic paint. I'm using my acrylic paint, but if you have brown spray paint, that would work great too. To make the beehive, I'm using some of the Dollar Tree nautical rope, and I'm going to end up using a bit more than 1 package. Using my glue gun, I started by attaching the rope on the top inside edge. I continued adding the glue and my rope and working my way around. Once I had it completely attached around the inside, I started working around the top edge. When I was done, I then continued adding the rope around the outside. If you don't have this container or you can't find it, you can use anything that you have on hand that you can wrap rope around and has an opening on the top. When I was getting near the bottom, I noticed I was going to be a little short on rope, so I just added on an extra piece. To make an opening on the front of the hive, I made a circle out of the rope small enough to fit on the front, and then I cut it to size. I then used my hot glue gun and attached it into a circle. Now that I have it in place, I'm using my black permanent marker and I'm going to color in the center. For the next step, I'm using a jointed bear that I have probably had this guy for 15 or 20 years and I never knew what to do with him. You can always use an upright bear from the Dollar Tree or find one at a retail store or thrifted or even a yard sale. This step is super easy. I'm having him sit in the hive and kind of lean back at an angle. I don't have any yellow hot glue, but if you do, you can definitely use that. I'm just using the clear glue from my glue gun and I'm drizzling it over the bear here and there, kind of like honey would drip. And I didn't have any preset pattern. I just kind of added it here and there. When I was done, the glue just kind of dripped where it wanted, and when I was done, I waited for it to cool down. To mimic the dripping honey, I'm going to be using some yellow and some gold acrylic paint. I started with the yellow paint and I worked my way around the bear, making sure to cover all the dripping hot glue honey. When I was done and the yellow paint had dried, I then went over it with my gold acrylic paint, just kind of touching it up here and there over the yellow. And this time, instead of using a paintbrush, I used the end of a skewer and just let the paint drip here and there. Now that my bear is covered in honey, I'm going to add on a couple of accents. I'm going to be adding on 3 daisies, but you can use any type of flowers that you'd like. Now, once again, using my hot glue gun, I glued one of the daisies next to the hive, one on the bear's ear, and one on the paw. What's a bumblebee hive without some sweet little bees? And I picked these up on Amazon, and I think I paid $11.99 for the bag. I also have a bumblebee pin that I've made, and you can use these instead. I'm using 3 of the felt bees, and I'm using my glue gun to attach them in place. I only added 3, but you can always add more or less if you like. To finish up my honey bear, I used some Dollar Tree buffalo check ribbon, and I made a simple bow. I cut it to size and then attached it under the bear's chin. And with that, this sweet honey bear is ready to display. I'm making some rustic carrots out of some old wooden shims, and you can pretty much use any type of old wood for this project. I picked out 3 pieces of wood from my wood pile, and using a pencil, I'm drawing a point on the end of each shim. I cut the bottom ends into a point, and then I slightly rounded the tops, but they're definitely not perfect. Because these are recycled pieces of wood, I'm using an old piece of sandpaper and I'm just sanding away any of the roughness. And now to give all 3 of them that classic carrot look, I'm painting each one with my orange acrylic paint. Now that all 3 of my carrots are dry, I'm using the same piece of sandpaper and just kind of roughing up the edges to give them that rustic appearance. To make some lines on my carrots to give them a little more of a realistic look, I'm using my pencil and I'm making some lines here and there, and then I'm rubbing them in with my finger. This step is completely optional, but I did do it to all 3 of my carrots. To make the carrot toppers, I'm using some raffia, and mine is long, so I'm folding the strands in half twice. Then using another piece of raffia, I'm tying them together. I trimmed down the top so most of the pieces were even, and then I made 2 more. I'm using my green acrylic paint, and I'm just kind of painting them here and there, and I'm leaving a lot of the natural raffia to show through. To attach the carrot tops, I'm just placing some hot glue on the back of each carrot and attaching the raffia. To attach my 3 carrots together, I'm using some E6000, which will hold them permanently, and some hot glue, which will help set them up quickly. I'm now attaching them together by placing 1 carrot onto the left and 1 onto the right. I let them set up, and then to hang them, I just cut a piece of jute and I hot glued it onto the back. And now that I'm done, these rustic shim carrots that basically cost me 0 to make are ready to hang. I'm starting my bumblebee pin by using one of these small wooden hearts. I'm also using an oval piece of wood, and I got this out of a Dollar Tree value pack, but you can always use a craft stick. The heart will be the body and the oval piece the head, so I'm just checking the size and then cutting the oval in half. Now using my yellow acrylic paint, I'm giving the heart a coat on both sides. When the paint's dry, I'm now using my black permanent marker because I'm not that good with a paintbrush, and I'm adding on the tail and 2 stripes. With that complete, I'm now using my black acrylic paint to paint the bumblebee's head. For the wings, I'm using 2 small wooden hearts. They're just a bit smaller than the body, and I'm painting those with some white acrylic paint. Now that the wings have dried, I'm using my pencil and I'm giving them a little accent. I'm rubbing the end of the pencil on the outside edge of the hearts and then just kind of rubbing it in with my finger. When I come to the center of the heart, I'm drawing a little bit of a line and then I'm smudging that as well. Now that I'm done, I have all 4 of my pieces complete, and it's time to put the bumblebee together. I'm using my E6000 and I'm attaching the head under the body. And now I'm adding on some more E6000 to attach the wings. Once my E6000 set up, I then used the end of a paintbrush along with my white acrylic paint and gave the bumblebee 2 eyes. To finish up, I'm adding a pin back, and I had picked these up at Michael's. I removed the backing, added on some E6000, and placed it on the bottom of the bumblebee. And with that, my bumblebee pin is ready to wear, and if you leave off the pin backing, you can always add the bumblebee to a piece of decor. I'm starting my next project by using one of the Dollar Tree wooden hangers. And I'm also going to be using 18 of the tumbling tower blocks. I'm starting with 12 of them and I'm going to attach them together using my Starbond thick glue, which if you follow me, you know this is my go-to glue for all my unfinished wood projects. It sets up super quick and I have the company linked below along with a coupon code in case you'd like to check it out. I'm using my glue and I'm attaching all 12 of the blocks together. To attach my base to the hanger, I'm once again adding some of my Starbond thick glue and I'm attaching the two pieces together. They set up in probably 2 to 3 minutes, and now I'm attaching 2 blocks standing up onto the front and 2 blocks to each side. When my 2 front and my 4 side blocks are in place, I'm then adding 2 blocks and attaching them to the base and the back of the hanger for some extra support. With my base complete, I'm removing the original hanger and using my white acrylic paint, I'm giving it a coat. I set that aside to dry, and now I'm recycling a tin can. I'm using a plain and a printed burlap ribbon from the Dollar Tree. I wrapped the plain burlap around the can and cut it to size and then cut a second piece. I used my glue gun and attached one piece around the can and then slightly overlapped my second piece and I attached that as well. I then measured and cut a piece of the printed burlap. I then attached that around the center to hide the seams. I'm adding on a bow and I took about an 8-inch piece of the burlap ribbon. I folded one end into the center and then the other I folded over slightly overlapping the first. I then took a small piece of burlap and I tied it around the center to hold my bow together. I then took about a 3-inch piece of the printed burlap ribbon, folded over the sides. I added some hot glue to the bow and I wrapped it around the center. I then added a dot of hot glue to the front of my can and I popped the bow into place. To hold the succulents in place, I cut a piece of Sahara large enough to fill the can. I picked these pretty succulents up at the Dollar Tree, and after I removed the tags, I just placed them into the can. To hide the Sahara foam, I just tucked in a little bit of reindeer moss. I placed the can onto my hanger, replaced the jute hanger, and now it's ready to display. To make my lemon birdhouse, I'm using this Dollar Tree house sign and removing as much of the added accents as possible. The flowers came off pretty easy, but boy, those leaves, I could not get them to move. I turned my sign over and I painted the front and the sides with some white acrylic paint. After the paint had dried, those leaves on the back were bugging me, so I found a flat blade and I chiseled most of them off. I then used a piece of sandpaper and that pretty much removed what was left. With all that finally gone, I then painted the back white. With my house painted and dry, I'm adding on my lemon accent. I'm using a lemon fabric Dollar Tree placemat. I made sure the house would fit over the design, and then I cut it free from the backing. I'm attaching the fabric to the front by first adding on a thick coat of Mod Podge. I then place down the fabric on the front, making sure to center the lemons in the middle. After I had the fabric pressed in place, I then added another coat of Mod Podge. Once it's dry, the Mod Podge makes the fabric stiff, so I'm using my scissors and cutting as close to the house as I can. To clean up what's left, I'm using my X-Acto knife and I'm just trimming away the edges. I'm making a base and a roof for my birdhouse, and I'm using some of the tumbling tower blocks from the Dollar Tree. For the base, I'm using 8 of the blocks, and for the roof, I'm using 12, 6 on each side. To attach the pieces together, I'm once again using my Starbond thick glue. I love it because it does set up so quick with unpainted wood, and I'm adding my 6 pieces together on one side, my 6 on the other, and the 8 on my base. If you'd like to give this glue a try, I do have the company linked below, along with a coupon code. I'm making my birdhouse with a lemon theme, but the Dollar Tree has some really pretty placemats that would also work great for this project. Now that all my pieces are attached and they've set up, I'm going to paint the base with some white acrylic paint and both of the pieces for the roof with some yellow. Now that they're dry, I'm going to add on this Farmhouse buffalo check ribbon. I picked this up at Michael's, and sometimes you can find it at the Dollar Tree. I attached it with my glue gun around all 4 edges. To attach it, I added a couple of dots of hot glue here and there to help hold it in place. Once the 2 pieces of the roof were complete, I then followed up with the base. Now that I have all 4 of my pieces complete, it's time to attach them together. I'm adding some hot glue to the bottom of my house and centering it on the base. I added some hot glue to the top of my house and centered on each roof panel. For the perch, I'm using a wooden handle from an old foam paintbrush. I'm cutting it about 2 inches in length and making sure that I'm cutting it on the end without the hole. For the faux opening, I'm using a round wooden circle, and I had picked this up at the Dollar Tree in one of their variety packs. I painted each white with my acrylic paint. To accent and give each a hint of color, I followed the edge of the circle with the side of my pencil. When I was done, I then rubbed my fingers around the outside edge and just kind of gave it a smudge. For the perch, I added some random pencil lines here and there on the sides, and then I smudged those as well. To add the faux opening, I placed a dot of glue about 2 inches down from the top and then attached my circle. To give it a bit of an accent, I'm adding a little bundle of Spanish moss to the bottom of the opening. I'm then attaching one of these little birds, and I did find this 4-pack at Michael's, onto the top of the Spanish moss. For the perch, you can drill a hole and then just kind of slide it in place, but I'm actually using my E6000 and just attaching it to the top. I added a dot onto the fabric and then just attached my perch. And now my cute farmhouse birdhouse is complete. I'm getting started by using one out of the 2-pack of the Dollar Tree terracotta pots. I'm using my white acrylic paint and I'm painting the bottom of the pot white and I'm leaving the top rim natural. If you want to help your paint dry a little quicker, just pull out your hair dryer and that will definitely help it along. I'm using some buttons as an accent on the pot and I picked up these 2 containers at the Dollar Tree. I picked out about a dozen or so that were matching in color and size. With my pot dry, I used my glue gun and placed on some dots of hot glue, evenly spacing the buttons around the pot. With all my buttons attached in place, I'm using a piece of Sahara from the Dollar Tree and I'm just placing the pot on top to get my size. I then used my knife to cut out the shape of the pot. When I was done, I then slipped it inside. I'm using one of these Dollar Tree succulents and it was supposed to come with a clip, but mine didn't have one. And I just removed the tag and I placed it in the center of the pot. To hide the Sahara, I'm using some of this Dollar Tree reindeer moss. I placed some around the succulent, and when I was done, it was ready to display. I'm starting my bunny pins by using 2 of the Dollar Tree clothespins. I needed to take them apart, so I removed the little metal clip that was in the center. I'm attaching my 2 pieces together by using my Starbond thick glue. It's my go-to glue for all my unfinished wood projects, and if you'd like to try it out, I have the company linked below along with a coupon code. I added a couple of dots of glue to one side and then attached the 2 pieces back together. It had pretty much set up in about 2 minutes. To cover the front of my clothespin, I'm using a craft stick and I'm cutting it just a bit smaller than the width of the clothespin. I'm then cutting one end into a point, but you can always make yours rounded or cut it off straight. I made sure the point was just under where the ears began and the bottom end was at the bottom of the clothespin. I then took an old piece of sandpaper and made sure that the sides and the bottom were smooth. I then once again used my Starbond thick glue and attached the 2 pieces together. After I made one, I then made a second because I'm making these for my daughters who are teachers. Once they had set up, I then used my white acrylic paint and gave them a coat. For the bunny's eyes, I'm just placing on 2 simple dots. I'm using the end of a paintbrush and my black acrylic paint. For the bunny's whiskers, I'm using some of the Dollar Tree jute and I cut a piece about 2 inches long. I then frayed up both ends but kept the jute attached in the middle. For one of the bunny's noses, I'm painting this small wooden heart pink. And for the other, I'm using one of the small pink Dollar Tree vase fillers. To attach the pieces together, I'm using my E6000. I'm placing down the whiskers and then each of the different noses. I know my girls will love these. One is an elementary school teacher and the other a middle school teacher. And I worked in a school for 13 years, so I know it's always fun to wear a festive pin around different holidays. With the E6000 dry, I placed some blush on the end of a cotton swab and then I just accented the front of the bunny's ears. I then gave the whiskers a little trim. I'm using my Dollar Tree polka dot ribbon and I'm making a small simple bow for each of them. I used my E6000 and attached a bow to the bottom of each. To add the pin backs, I'm using 2 from this package that I picked up at Michael's. I added some E6000 to the back of each and then added them onto the back of the bunnies. And now that they're done, I can't wait to give them to my daughters. To make my farmhouse chair, I'm using one of these pink ones. It actually came as a set of 2 and I picked it up at the Dollar Tree. I found it in the toy department and I used its twin as a beach chair in a summer wreath I made. I'll have that linked below in my description in case you'd like to check it out. I'm using my scissors to remove the 3 center supports, but you can always use a razor blade to get a cleaner cut. With the supports removed, I'm covering the pink with my white acrylic paint. I'm using white, but I think you could use just about any color for this project. And if you had spray paint on hand, instead of painting it, you could always spray it. With the paint completely dry, I'm attaching some of this buffalo check ribbon that I picked up at Michael's onto the chair as an accent. I'm using the ribbon in place of the supports. I'm wrapping it around the chair and then cutting it to size. I'm adding some dots of glue on the legs and attaching the ribbon around the chair. I'm adding a container of flowers to my chair and I'm using a candle cup that I already had on hand, but you can use anything at all as long as it's size appropriate. I gave mine a coat of the white acrylic paint, and when it had dried, I used the same buffalo check ribbon and attached a piece around the top. Once that was in place, I then used the same ribbon and made a simple bow. I cut the 2 tails to the length I wanted and then attached it to the front of my holder. For my flower accent, I'm using these pretty purple and white flowers and I already had these on hand. I added some hot glue into my container and then I tucked in the flowers. To add them to my chair, I simply added on a dot of hot glue and centered them in the seat. To add on my bird accent, I'm using one of these pretty yellow birds that I found at Michael's. I added a dot of glue to the back of my chair and attached the bird in place. And with that, this sweet farmhouse chair makes the perfect accent for my desk. For my next project, I'm using one of the cutting boards from the Dollar Tree. I'm making my display board so you can either stand it up or hang it on the wall. So I'm going to be using 9 of the tumbling tower blocks. I'm using my Starbond thick glue and I'm attaching 3 blocks together in a set of 3. They set up super quick, and once again using my Starbond thick glue, I'm attaching the 3 of them to the bottom of my board. To add on my bead accent, I'm using 2 1-inch and 4 1/2-inch. I slid them onto a skewer to make them easier to paint, and then I gave them all a coat of my sage acrylic paint. While those are drying, I'm using 2 clothespins from the Dollar Tree and I'm painting both of those white. With my beads dry, I'm cutting about 18 inches of the Dollar Tree jute. And then I'm threading on my beads, making sure the two largest are on the ends. I'm placing my beads on the front of my board and wrapping the jute around the back and then tying it into a knot. I'm then using my E6000 and attaching the jute into place. To keep my jute from moving, I'm attaching a tumbling tower block over each end. To attach my clothespins, I'm simply clipping them over the jute. And now that I'm done, I can either stand it up or hang it. I added on a sweet little note card that I received from a friend, and with that, my project is complete. To start my farmhouse vase, I'm actually using one of the toothbrush holders that I found in the bath department at the Dollar Tree. I'm also using a piece of this buffalo check ribbon that came from the Dollar Tree, and I'm wrapping it around the toothbrush holder and cutting it to size. I then added some hot glue and attached my ribbon into place. I'm now using the same buffalo check ribbon and I'm making a simple bow. I used my scissors to shorten the tails, and then using my glue gun, I attached it over the ribbon. So because the top of this reminds me of a flower frog, I'm using some Dollar Tree picks and some flowers that I already had on hand. To finish up my 5-minute project, I'm simply adding them into the holes. And now that I'm done, I have a cute and easy centerpiece to display. Here we are at the end of the video, and I really hope you enjoyed making these spring and Easter DIYs with me. If you're new to my channel and you're thinking, hey, I'd like to come back and hang out with her again, don't forget to click that little red subscribe button below. If you're looking for more home decor inspiration, I'll leave some of my other crafty ideas at the end of this video. I hope you all have an amazing day, and I will see you soon. Bye, everybody!